All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. For those who don't know me, my name is Chris Raffle, and I am the co-founder of Upsert. We became a sugar value-added reseller almost 3 years ago, and prior to that, I was the VP of Sugar's global customer support organization. And a few notes before we get started. If you have any questions, just go ahead and enter them into the chat. We'll have a Q&A session near the end to answer anything. Also have Kirsty taking a look in if there's anything more urgent, like my internet connection deciding to go out at an unopportune time. But yeah, if there's any questions, just post them there, and we'll get to those as soon as possible. And we'll have a few polls throughout the webinar. To get to the polls in Google Meet, you'll click on the activities icon, which is it's an icon with shapes down in the lower right-hand corner. And once you click that, then you'll select polls from there to see any polls that we post. And lastly, as we go into our slideshow here, this is probably going to be the last high resolution image that you're going to see here, just to have a little bit of fun. And we used a Cryon AI image generator to find some appropriate images for the rest of the slideshow here. So you'll see that they're a little bit more abstract. Anyways, as we get started, this is our first webinar in our series around plugins that Upsert has built to boost admin efficiency. And we're highlighting our plugin called Upsert Sudo. And for some people coming into this, you may have a question as to what the heck is sudo, because it's a term that, depending on your background, you may not be familiar with at all. Sudo is a technical command for, it's called super user do, based out of Unix-based operating systems. So basically what it means is that it gives someone permission to act on behalf as another user within the system. So now that you know what sudo is, what is Upsert Sudo? And Upsert Sudo is a tool that empowers Sugar super users, whether those be administrators or designated users, to perform actions on behalf of other users. So thinking about as a Sugar admin user, if you have a new user coming on board that you need to set up some configuration within the application, you can use sudo to quickly impersonate as that user and go ahead and make changes as you see fit. It also helps in the realm of troubleshooting the application. So a user has reported an issue in the application. You've tried to reproduce it. You can't reproduce the issue, but administrators naturally have a lot more access and capabilities than regular users do. So it can be something to them. Can be something due to those types of permissions and restrictions. So using sudo as a tool to go through that same workflow as the exact user, you can quickly narrow down, is this an actual issue with rights and permissions, or could it be something else, like maybe the user's browser or something that they are doing personally that isn't configurable within Sugar itself. So with that, I'd like to go into our first poll here, and this is primarily geared towards Sugar customers, but want to know, where is your instance of Sugar hosted? All right, and looking at the results here of option of being on Sugar's cloud or on site, we have votes for Sugar Cloud here, and as I think one of the key aspects here is that Sugar has its own feature called Sugar Impersonate, which has some similar functionality to Upsert Sudo. And as we go into some of the differentiating factors between Upsert Sudo versus Sugar Impersonate, I think it's important to know where you're hosted to even know what's available to you. So with Upsert Sudo, it's a tool that you can deploy whether you are deployed on site, whether that be your own servers or in something like AWS, or if you're in Sugar Cloud, whereas Sugar Impersonate is only through Sugar Cloud instances, and that's because Sugar Impersonate is actually through their Sugar Identity service, which only works with the Sugar Cloud instances. The the types of users that can access the feature, with Upsert Sudo, we allow you to configure that with administrators as well as any designated users. So thinking about the use case where you want a manager to be able to help their users be onboarded or make changes for their users, you can empower managers without giving them full administrative access to the application. And in general, having less administrators is better when you're looking at CRM. So having tools where you can just give them the specific access to things that's going to help them make their jobs easier versus having to give them a full-fledged is a nice benefit here. Whereas Sugar Impersonate is something that's strictly limited to administrators only. There's no way for non-admins to use this type of feature. Accessing the feature is something that you can do directly within Sugar. And when we get into the live demo around this, you'll see why that can be especially beneficial when you're doing troubleshooting of the application or even configuration. Whereas with Sugar Impersonate, you have to go into Sugar Identity, select the user that you want to impersonate, and guide the experience from there. And lastly is security audit. So with Upsert Sudo, you have an audit of any time a user does go through the sudo feature and to act on behalf as another user. That's created of that event when they started impersonating that user, and then whenever they stopped the session. Whereas with Sugar Impersonate, their information is accessible, but it's only accessible by filing support cases with Sugar support. So you need to do that each time you would want to review that type of data. So with that, I am going to go into our live demo portion. And the first thing I go through is the configuration of Upsert Sudo. So when you go to the admin interface in Sugar, there's a panel for Upsert Sudo, and you can go into the configuration settings. And this is what we alluded to on the last slide. Within the configuration, you can select any combination of users, roles, and teams to have access to this specific type of feature. So for instance, we've decided that sales administrators and customer support administrator roles, they're not full-fledged administrator accounts or roles, but the people within that role can have access to Sudo so they can do things on behalf of the users they oversee. Similarly, we could select individual managers that we want to, Sarah and Will in this case, to where they have access to the Sudo feature. Or if we wanted to add in a team, we could do that as well. But it allows you to mix and match whatever type of configuration you'd like to set here to ultimately set up who has access to the Sudo feature. Now, as the admin user on the Sugar system, we have a module called Help Desk Tickets. And just to walk through a few potential examples of how Sudo can be best leveraged. And the first one we're going to look at here is this help desk ticket around a user who's unable to view a particular account. So as we bring up the focus drawer here, we have a user who says that their manager asked them to take over an account and follow up with an opportunity. He gave them a link to the account, but that user gets a data not available message and says that the link works for him. So we go ahead and open the link. We see, sure enough, it does show up for the admin user here. Now, the user who's reporting this, his name was Chris, and we're going to go ahead and log in as Chris to see if he gets to see, if we're able to see the account record there. So under the profile menu, I just go ahead and select to sudo login and select Chris. And now that's going to shift over, basically refresh the screen here. And this is where the benefit of accessing sudo directly from within Sugar is helpful, in that whichever page you're on, when you access that sudo feature, it's going to try and access that page as that same user. Whereas if I had to go into Sugar Identity, select the user I want to impersonate, I'd then have to navigate back to the part of the application that I wanted to experience here. So a couple of things to note. One, most obvious, is that we do see the data not available message that Chris is receiving here. But more importantly, when you're sudoing in as someone else, you see up the top right, the badge around where the profile icon is now a yellow color to indicate that I'm no longer logged in as myself, that I'm acting on behalf as another user. So it's a visual reminder to know that you're in the system as a different user. So I can go into other accounts and see information and act as if I was Chris. But as far as the actual area where Chris was experiencing an issue, that was something that we were able to reproduce. So I'm going to go ahead and log out as Chris. And as we go back into our admin interface, we'll see the audit history. So sudo login history. You'll see here, Jen sudoed in as Chris Oliver. Here is the login date and time and when the logout was done, and shows all the information in relation to that sudo session. So you have a pure audit trail of what user performed what action there. Now, so we confirmed that Chris is unable to view that account without having to go through the nuts and bolts of why that account's not visible. It's effectively because Chris belonged to a role where he is only able to see accounts that he is assigned to. And so that's something that the admin user, once they're able to reproduce that type of error, they would know that there's a type of role or team permission issue that's restricting Chris from viewing that record, and go ahead and make the necessary updates. So in this case, we'll go ahead and bring up the account and change the assigned to over to Chris. Then we'll go ahead and log back in as him and make sure that everything is resolved. So now we're logged in as Chris. The account comes up as expected. So we can go ahead and let them know, whoever asked them to take over the account overlooked reassigning it to them, and take care of everything from there. So we have that ticket closed out. Now we'll look at the next ticket here, where there's a new user that's coming on board for Sally. And if we bring this up, we see here there's a new sales rep, Sally, starting next Monday, and want to make sure that her account gets provisioned and configured for training. We see over on the right-hand side that there is a customer journey that was triggered for this new user account. Her account's already been created in Sugar. She's been granted access to the customer journey feature. The next piece is to configure the user preferences for Sally. And user preferences could be anything from the modules shown to how the subpanels are displayed on specific record views, etc. So we'll go ahead into the account module, for example, and log in as Sally, or sudo in as Sally, I should say. You'll see here, with it being a new user account, it's actually going to take me through as if I'm logging in for the first time. So I have to check to accept the cookies. It brings me in. If you see, we're logged in as Sally, and now I can go ahead through with some configurations. One of the first things I want to do is tailor the experience for Sally so it aligns with what she's going to be trained on next week. You'll notice here Sally's default setting is to go into dark mode, or the system setting, I should say, which my typical settings are dark mode, but in this case we want to set it to light, so we're going to go ahead and save that. Then we can go ahead and make some additional changes. So with Sally being a sales rep, there's particular modules in here that she isn't going to need access to on a day-to-day basis. So this isn't removing the modules entirely from access, but it is helping to clean up the view from things that she does on a day-to-day, so that the modules that she'll see are going to be more important there. As we scroll down, we can easily pick out the modules that are things that she just doesn't need to navigate to on a day-to-day basis, and move those over to hidden modules. And then as we do that, we'll go ahead and set the date format to something that she's date and time format to something that she's more than likely to use, and also configure the time zone. So then we go ahead and save that. And similarly, we may know for the sales reps that they have specific modules that they're most common to interact with. So when we go into a particular record view, we may want to readjust the sub panels so that the most important things that she's going to be interacting with are going to be at the top and easily accessible. So it's not something that she has to hunt through all the different aspects of the data shown, but we're making sure that these particular sub panels are going to be front and center for her, so that she knows where, or she can easily find the information that's most important for her day-to-day responsibility. And then as we go into other modules, we can do the same. So as the admin user, I've been able to go ahead and sudo in as Sally, make all uh, the UI changes that I want to make sure that she's going to log in on her first day and see things that are relevant and things that she understands for her job, and that anything that she's going to be trained on, it's going to align with the materials that they do, so that you don't have to worry about her figuring out how to configure Sugar on her first day, as well as how to just even use other aspects of the application. It helps reduce that initial learning curve. If the user hasn't used Sugar before, it just is going to be a lot easier whenever the training that they receive is going to be really about how they do their job, not necessarily how to use the application. So then I can go ahead and log out of this. And go back to my dashboard here. Then just mark these complete. So now I'm ready to email the manager and their training coordinator and let them know that Sally is good to go for next week. So with that, I'm going to go back to our slideshow here and see if there's any questions around Upsert Sudo. And Christy, if you have everyone muted, if you can go and unmute.
No question, Chris, but I do use it every single day, and I have several designated users, as you guys well know, that use it very regularly, and sometimes even forget that they're sudoed in as a person and start wondering why their comments are another person's name. So it is a very helpful tool, and the warnings are built in there for that. So
Thanks, JD. All right. Well, we're going to go on to our second poll here, our second and final poll. And this is going to be a regular occurring webinar series. And we want your feedback on what plugin we should feature in our next webinar. And we've narrowed it down to 4 of our plugins. If you haven't had an opportunity to visit our website, we have quite a few more than this, but we're looking to keep it concise here. So I'd like you to take an opportunity once the poll is posted, is to go ahead and vote for one of the 4 options that you would like to see highlighted in our next webinar. And if you have any questions before we close the poll, feel free to ask. All right. We have We have a tie right now, so I'll cast the deciding vote. But we'll most likely highlight BPM Essentials as our next plugin for our next webinar here. And for whoever voted for Lens, that'll be coming soon enough. All right. So I'd like to thank everyone for taking the opportunity to attend the webinar around Upsert Sudo. As you can see through an AI image generator, people are very excited to be using Upsert software. They don't quite catch the Upsert logo yet in the AI yet, but if give it enough time, maybe it'll make it into the image generation. But this could be you someday. So thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us through our website, or you can contact us via email or phone as well.